Remember that your existence and your worth are more fundamental than any belief.
Beliefs are just the creation of the idea of the physical mind. Your existence is far more fundamental. That, in some senses, should be obvious. And if you exist, that means you have to be worthy, because creation doesn't make mistakes. And if you exist, then that means existence needs you to exist, or existence wouldn't be complete. So you are that worthy, because again, the things that existence didn't need don't exist. So your worth and your existence are far more fundamental than any belief. And if you just go back to that core remembrance, then the belief will be seen as a secondary level illusion and not a true fundamental truth or reality.
Remember that negative beliefs make positive beliefs easier to see by contrast.
You can use the idea of negativity in a positive way. That's basically what this means. So you're not invalidating the negative belief, but turning it back on itself and saying, well, thank you, negative belief, for being so dark, because by being so dark, you actually allow it to be much easier to see the little light in the distance, which, if things were brighter, I might not have noticed. So, in the vastness and empty void of space, a single tiny spark of light is much easier to see because of all the blackness. So you can use the negativity to your advantage and turn its trick around on itself by saying, thank you for showing me the contrast, because many times it's a lot easier for many of you to simply understand what it is you do prefer by being shown an example very clearly of what you don't prefer by contrast. Then you know what direction to go in more easily.
Another neutralizer is that you can remember that negative beliefs are your creation and that you're always in control, you're always empowered, and even if you're using your power to make it seem like you're out of control.
That's again the thing to understand about the nature of existence and your existence as well, is that there can be no such thing as an actual disconnection from Source. But Source supports you so unconditionally in your choices that you can choose to pretend that you are disconnected. But the paradox is the only way you can actually have an experience of disconnection is to use your connection to create it. So if you remember that you're always empowered, then you will realize and remember that the only way you could possibly have an experience of disempowerment is if you're using your power to create that experience of disempowerment. And once you remember that it's simply not actually possible to be disempowered, again, you will neutralize the negative belief's insistence on your lack of power.
Another neutralizer is if you remember that positive beliefs will never use negative reinforcement, but that negative beliefs will always use positive reinforcement because they are deceptive by design.
Exactly. So always pay attention when they are leading you down the so-called primrose path and painting a rosy picture of something that you know is actually negative, because they have to work very hard to make it seem positive in order for you to follow it. But you can recognize that they are being deceitful because that's their nature to be so, in order to perpetuate themselves, because you know the truth about yourselves, and they have to lie to you to get you to buy into what they're saying by pretending that they know better, by pretending they have your best interests at heart, and then coloring things to make it look like that's the path to take, when really, if you just stood back and looked at what they were doing, you would realize that it's just a path of rocks and thorns that they're convincing you to step on.
Another thing that you can do is you can remember the yin-yang concept, that no matter how dark things may seem, you always have the ability to reach the light.
Within the idea of the polarity in existence, there is always an opportunity, just as in the yin-yang symbol, to recognize that on the dark side, there is always a spot of white. And on the dark side, there always is that. And on the white side, always a spot of dark. so that you know the doorways exist in both directions and you can always choose. No matter how dark it may seem, you will always know there is a doorway to the light. Always. But at the same time, knowing that no matter how light it seems, you always have the power to choose the dark. This again brings you back into balance, brings you back into the center point where you can neutralize everything and realize that all choices are just equally valid, and then choose what you prefer with a clear conscience and from a state of balance. So remember that symbol.
Another method is to remember to be okay with the process of discovering what your negative beliefs are so that you can let go of them.
Many people, again, are convinced by the negative belief that they should be absolutely perfectly spiritual beings by now. Why do these things keep happening to me? What's wrong with me? I should be far beyond this at this particular point. But you see, the process is the point. You will transition at some point from the idea of letting go of negative beliefs to something else. But it will always be a process, so be okay with process, because process is the point of having a physical life. Because you cannot change without the idea of process. In a timeless state, there's no change. Only by creating the illusion of space and time can you go through the idea of discovering yourself from a new point of view. So be happy with the process, love the process, be passionate about discovering through the process, because process is the equivalent of life. You're living a life that is by nature a process of discovery. That's what it's all about. The journey is the destination, the process is the point. So live in the process, live in the now with the process, and it will serve you in positive ways. Let it be okay to go through those processes. The difference will come in this way. At some point, when you are finally willing to investigate all the negative beliefs, bring them to conscious light, and let them go, the process of letting things go will continue, but the way the process then expresses itself is it changes from letting go of negative beliefs to letting go of things that are simply no longer relevant for you in life. They may be positive things, but eventually you will streamline yourself by letting go of even positive things that simply are no longer relevant for the being you now know and prefer yourself to be. So the process won't stop even when you let go of all the negative ideas. So please don't turn the process into another negative idea, because it isn't. Or doesn't have to be.
Another neutralizer is remember that negative beliefs belong to someone else and you don't have to carry them.
Yes. As we said, things that are truly out of alignment with who you are don't belong to you. You most likely picked them up along the way. But they are baggage that belong to other people that you've simply been convinced that you have to carry. But because it belongs to other people, that's why it's so heavy. That's why it weighs you down. The beliefs that are true and in alignment for you weigh nothing. It feels effortless. You feel light as a feather. When you start to feel weighed down, that can be one of the clues you're carrying something that doesn't belong to you. So investigate it. Drop the baggage. As we have said, do not steal other people's beliefs and be a belief thief. You don't want to steal other people's beliefs. Drop them and move on and lighten your load. Remember that the first step to enlightenment is to lighten up on yourself and lighten your load.
Remember that you're never alone and you always have help.
You may always be capable of experiencing solitude in a positive way, but you are never, ever, 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 ever actually, truly alone. You cannot be, because you are connected to everything. You are everything, expressing itself as everything, expressing itself as every aspect of itself. and thus you are all the reflections, and they are you. You are never alone. You have help, you have guides, you have friends, you have family on many different levels, and connections more than you can imagine from this perspective. You can always create the experience of solitude, and that solitude will always be respected to give you the space you need to function as the individual that you are, but you are never, ever, ever alone. And the second that anyone knows that assistance is required, assistance is always given. You are constantly, in fact, being bombarded with all the assistance we, your guides, and many other beings and source can possibly give. If you feel that the assistance isn't there, it's not because it's not being given, it's because you are blocking the reception by negative beliefs and buying into them. So as soon as you let go, you will suddenly realize, and in fact almost be blinded with the assistance that is always flowing your way without let up of any kind. So tap into that river and let it flow through you, because it's always coming. It cannot stop.
Remember that you're always loved and supported, no matter what.
Again, this goes to your worthiness. If you were not worthy, you wouldn't exist. So if you exist, you're worthy. And the idea is, therefore, you have absolute right to all the energy, all the support, all the love, as you call it, of all that is, because that is the energy of existence itself. And if you are part of existence, then it is your nature to experience the ideas you translate in your reality as unconditional love and support. It's your nature that you're experiencing when you experience those energies. It's the nature of existence itself translating in physical terms that you call that feeling of unconditional love and unconditional support. It's your nature.
Remember to forgive yourself and others.
Forgiveness is exceedingly powerful as a tool. Here's exactly vibrationally why. Forgiveness is a state of being that can actually mitigate the effects of the consequences of a negative act. You have, many of you at least, heard of the idea that when you die, many people experience what is called life review. Yes? And in that life review experience, it has been reported that what happens, because there are no longer the same barriers between you and another, that you will suddenly start to experience in that life review not only the things that happened visually, but you will actually experience the consequences of anything you chose to do and the way in which others may have experienced them based on your intentions, as if you're experiencing the consequences from their point of view. You understand? So if you have in any way, shape, or form intentionally caused hurt or harm to someone, in the life review, you will feel exactly what they felt when you did that, as if you were them. Forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness from others, forgiveness to others is actually a vibrational state that will actually mitigate the effect of the consequence of a negatively intentioned act. So the more forgiveness you can create for yourselves, the more you can forgive others, the more you are evening the playing field, and the less need there is for you to experience the idea of the negative energy that was initially created by a negative act. It's as simple as that. It is a mitigation cancellation system. That's what forgiveness is as an energy. It's bringing everything back to zero.